For years, you've been told that carbohydrates are good for you and that they should make 60 to 70% of your diet. But what if I tell you that that advice was wrong? The truth is, eating too much carbohydrates can be dangerous. And in this video, I will reveal to you 5 unexpected side effects that you have probably never heard about. So watch the video until the end and you will get the whole picture about carbohydrates and how much you can eat in order to be safe and healthy. I'm Dr. Nesh Jocic, former bodybuilding champion. I competed 46 times and won 17 titles. I have trained over 3,000 people during my career that spreads over 40 years in bodybuilding. And I've also published 10 ebooks which you can download from my website. Just click on the link below and you will get access. So let us start with the dangers of carbohydrates. So it's not necessarily that quality is so important of carbohydrates that you eat. What is also important, or even more important, is the quantity. So people often talk about bad choice of carbohydrates being only simple sugars, white bread, white rice, pasta, and similar, because they are apparently fast releasing carbohydrates with high glycemic index. This is true, but even if you eat low glycemic index carbohydrates, you will still get a lot of glucose in the blood, meaning that you will have to release too much insulin. Now, let me start with the number one unwanted consequence for that comes out of eating too many carbohydrates. So this is insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes. This is important for everybody to understand. Either you are a bodybuilder or you're just recreational or you are completely inactive. Everybody needs to know this because this is essential for your health. So muscles, they're fine. Getting bigger, stronger is great, but you need to take care of your health as well. So especially for bodybuilders, guys, listen to this carefully and watch this video until then. You need to know these things, right? So insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes. So the core mechanism of developing insulin resistance is basically in the process of releasing glucose into the blood after you eat carbohydrates, which obviously triggers insulin response. So pancreas produces insulin in order to remove that high level of glucose in the blood. Some of it will be stored into glycogen stores, but some of it will be stored in fat deposits. Now, for most of the time, for most of the people, glycogen stores are full. So when you eat carbohydrates and your glycogen stores are full, your body will have no other option but to store those carbohydrates in the fat stores, fat cells, that glucose, because your glycogen stores are full. So every time you eat carbohydrates, you release insulin. Now, if you eat carbohydrates all day long, let's say you have 4, 5, 6 meals, and every meal has carbohydrates, as most of you guys are doing, right? So your insulin will be high throughout the day. You will always gonna be high insulin level in the blood because of the sheer volume, amount of glucose in the blood. If you eat another carb meal or a snack before your insulin returns to baseline, they will constantly stay elevated. So basically, eating every 3 hours for bodybuilding purposes is fine, but you need to understand that you're playing a dangerous game because that insulin level will be constantly high. Now, what happens when your insulin levels are constantly high? That means that your insulin receptors on the cells will start closing down and you will become insulin resistant. So you're not going to be insulin sensitive anymore because you never have that lack of insulin in the blood. So once you have the lack of insulin, the receptors open. But because of the constant presence of insulin, your receptors on the muscle cells, they will start closing down. That means that your body will have to produce more insulin, to pump more insulin into the blood. And this is something that is not very healthy, is dangerous. So, as I mentioned, people often say, "Oh, but this only applies to high glycemic index carbohydrates like sugars or white bread or white rice or something like that." But not necessarily. It's not about glycemic index. It's even more about glycemic load, because regardless of what kind of carbohydrates you eat, any carbohydrates will have to turn into glucose, and that glucose will have to be dealt with. So once you have high level of glucose in the blood, insulin will be absolutely necessary to remove that from the blood, because otherwise you're going to get high blood sugar shock. Your brain can stop working because they cannot absorb that much sugar. So insulin has to lower it. By lowering it, insulin is pushing that either into glycogen stores, which are probably full, and if they're full, the rest of the glucose will go into fat stores. So why is insulin resistance so dangerous? Well, the insulin resistance is underlying cause, is the main cause actually of developing type 2 diabetes. Insulin resistance creates a constant production of insulin by pancreas. So your pancreas never stops. Over a period of years, pancreas will start running down of its capacity. It will start producing less and less and less insulin, because beta cells will completely be exhausted, and they will stop. They will start dying, basically. So when your pancreas start producing less insulin, it will come to the point that it will produce very little insulin. This is when you become diabetic. You develop diabetes type 2. So diabetes type 2 develops because pancreas cannot produce insulin anymore, and this is when you need to take exogenous insulin. So this is the problem. Overeating of carbohydrates over the period of time, years, depending on your genetic predisposition. Obviously, some people can develop it faster, some slower, but the pancreas simply get exhausted and it cannot produce enough insulin. And this is when you will start taking extra insulin in order to manage your metabolic functions. So another reason why it's very dangerous is that even the skinny people, even if you're skinny, you can develop insulin resistance and eventually type 2 diabetes. So it doesn't really matter if you are big, if you're fat, or if you're skinny. If you are overeating carbohydrates over years, you are actually slowly, developing that insulin resistance and eventually diabetes type 2. This is why it's so common among many cultures which predominantly eat carbohydrates in their diet. Now, number two unwanted consequence is fat gain and obesity. So, as I explained to you, how do we get fat? Why is insulin so bad making us fat? Basically, the role of insulin is to deliver glucose. Primary role is to deliver glucose to glycogen stores, or if glycogen stores need glucose. Now, because glycogen stores are most of the time in most of the people full, most of the glucose from the blood will be taken away into the fat cells, in which glucose will be converted into fat. Fatty acids. So basically, when people say, "Oh, but I'm training and I'm burning a lot of glycogen, so I can eat a lot of carbohydrates, this is not a problem." Well, not necessarily, because if you think how much glycogen do you really burn during your workout, do you burn 50, 60 grams? 70? You don't burn more than that. So don't think that you're burning 300-400 grams of glycogen and then you can eat 300-400 grams of carbs and they will all go into glycogen. No, they will not, because you don't burn that much glycogen. High-intensity bodybuilding workout doesn't burn much glycogen. Okay? So if you burn 50 grams of glycogen and then you eat 100 grams of carbs afterwards in your meal after your workout, 50 grams of those carbohydrates will most likely end up in your glycogen stores because they were emptied for that much, but the rest will go into the fat stores. And then if you have another meal and another meal later on during the day, all these carbohydrates, all that glucose will will not be going into glycogen stores because they're full now. It will go into the fat cells and be converted into fatty acids and basically store as we know as fat. So into fatty acids and triglycerides. So why are carbs actually constantly driving us to overeat them? Because there is a vicious cycle of insulin, and carbohydrates are very addictive. So when you eat carbohydrates, you feel satisfied, you produce hormones which are going to make you happy. But the problem is that insulin will wipe down that glucose level in your blood that comes after eating carbohydrates, and it will bring it below the necessary level. So when you get there, you're going to get hungry, because also high carbohydrate meal stimulate a hormone known as ghrelin, which is actually the hunger hormone. So you get hungry because insulin will drive down your blood sugar, and also that will trigger ghrelin. So you have to eat again. If you eat carbs again, that will happen again and again, as many times as you eat. This is why people are dependent on eating every 2-3 hours, especially bodybuilders, because this diet is basically unhealthy. This diet with carbohydrates in every meal, meaning overeating carbohydrates long run, is very dangerous for your health, guys. So think twice about it. So also high carbohydrate diet and high insulin levels are responsible for developing visceral fat, which is the most dangerous fat in the body. This is the fat around your organs, and that fat actually causes all kind of problems, all kind of chronic diseases, and is linked to heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and also certain cancers. So you have to understand that overeating carbohydrates is not as innocent as you have thought. Yes, it's nice, you feel strong, you feel happy, but think about your future. You will not be 20, 25, 30 all your life. You will be 40 and 50, and then what? What, are you going to give up? Well, you will not. I can tell you that. Every stage of your life will be as important as the previous one. So you have to think about your future. So typical example of overeating carbohydrates, breakfast with porridge or some cereals, and then next this huge spike in glucose, and then you can crash mid-morning, obviously, and then you have to eat again. And again, that next meal maybe is chicken and rice, or in some cases people eat biscuits or sandwiches or something like that. Again, the same scenario will happen. High spike of glucose, surge of insulin, drop the glucose down, and over we go again. So if these patterns repeat over the day, it will keep insulin high and fat burning impossible. So the third dangerous side effect is chronic inflammation. So what is inflammation? Glucose, high content of glucose, actually causes a production of pro-inflammatory cytokines. So those cytokines basically are precursors of prostaglandins, which are actually causing inflammation of the inner layer of endothelium on your arteries. So the problem is when you get inflammation, you get those small little cracks. The body will respond by sending immediately white blood cells and also low density lipoprotein with cholesterol to actually repair that damage. Now the problem is that when the damage is repaired, and usually LDL leave more cholesterol on the wall in order to be fully covered that crack, small crack. Now the HDL has to come and remove that. But when you eat high carbohydrate diet, your HDL is not very high. It's going to be low. This is number one thing. The number two thing is, in the high presence of insulin, these deposits of cholesterol start, and also white blood cells, they start calcifying, and then HDL cannot remove them. And this is the major cause of clogging up the arteries. So number one, high glucose in the blood all the time. Number two, high glucose and high insulin levels, they always go together, they're unavoidable. They will create inflammation, which will be repaired. The body will attempt to repair by bringing LDL with cholesterol. And the problem is that high presence of insulin it will cause calcification of those deposits. And then HDL won't be able to remove them from all these extra layers from the arteries. And this is the major process. So this is the problem of chronic inflammation caused by overeating of carbohydrates. Fourth unexpected and dangerous, basically, consequence is energy crashes and cravings. So this is the blood sugar roller coaster. So when you eat carbohydrates, even if they are not high glycemic ones, any carbohydrates, it will cause raise in your blood sugar. Your body will respond by sending insulin and it will lower it quickly. The rapid drop levels leaves you, this rapid drop is going to leave you tired, irritable, and craving quick sugar or carbohydrate meal. So this is basically what is happening constantly, especially in the bodybuilding circles. People get hungry within 2-3 hours of eating high carbohydrate meal, chicken and rice, for example. This is why they have to eat 6-7 times a day. But I have talked about different types of diet and how you can still get a lot of protein in your diet without eating 6-7 times a day. And the problem is that this is a vicious cycle, and more often you eat, more often you feed your cravings with high carbs, more you will develop them. So over time, this will lead to literally compulsive eating habits. People just can't get out of it. And although you may be fine, you may feel no problems when you are in your 20s and 30s, this will prepare the stage for insulin resistance and even more complicated and more dangerous conditions like, for example, type 2 diabetes or maybe heart disease or similar. Number 5 unwanted dangerous consequence is poor heart health. So the metabolic damage caused by overeating carbohydrates is that excess glucose raises triglycerides. This is the fat in your blood, and lowers your HDL, high density lipoprotein. So when you do your blood test, there are 2 major markers there that you should pay attention to. One is triglycerides and another one is HDL. Now, the ratio between triglycerides and HDL should be favorable for your health. But if your triglycerides are high, which happens with people who eat lots of carbohydrates, and your HDL is low, the ratio will be negative, unfavorable for you. So you want your triglycerides to be as low as possible, right? And HDL as high as possible. So these 2 markers are actually directly related to food that you eat. High carbohydrate diets, lower HDL, increase triglycerides. Very bad for your heart. So guys, do your blood test and check and remind yourself about what I just said. Also, another marker which is often neglected in typical blood tests, most of the time is even not done, is fasting insulin. So you want to check your fasting insulin. And you want that fasting insulin to be really low. That means that if your fasting insulin is low, that means that you're very insulin sensitive. My fasting insulin was below 1. So it's even below recommended level, because I don't eat any carbohydrates or I eat them sparingly in very small amounts. So if your fasting insulin is high, meaning your insulin levels, first thing in the morning when you should do the blood test, fasting insulin, you're in fasting state, if your insulin is high, you're not doing good. You're developing insulin resistance. So check that fasting insulin, number one, and then check your triglycerides, you want them to be low, and your HDL, you want it to be high. So these three markers are critical. And if they are not favorable, then long-term you may have serious heart problems like heart attacks, strokes, and also peripheral artery diseases. So I think I have mentioned to you 5 unwanted, unexpected, dangerous consequences that people usually don't talk about, all due to overeating of carbohydrates. In my other videos that you can see, I talk about different types of diets, and I talk about high protein diet, medium fat, low carbohydrate diet as the healthiest option. So people often come to me and say, "Oh, but you know, carbs are good for you. You need them for energy, to fuel your muscles and this and that." I mean, yes, right, this is true, but how much carbs do you need? Do you need to eat 400-500 grams of carbs a day? No, you don't need it. It's too much. Oh, but professional bodybuilders are eating up to 1,000 grams of carbs a day. Well, they do, but what they do also is very dangerous. They're taking exogenous insulin in order to force those carbohydrates into the muscle cells, and that's a suicidal attempt when it comes to health. So you don't want to even think about it. People in the past used to eat less carbohydrates, and they didn't take insulin. And this is why when you watch all these Mr. Olympias or other competitions in 70s and 80s, you will see them all lean, all midsection, always small, performing something which is completely forgotten nowadays and is like a vacuum pose. Every single one would do that. Arnold, Frank Zane, Lee Haney would do it. Because why were they able to hit double biceps and their abdominals, everything will just sink inside, will almost disappear? Because obviously they didn't have any visceral fat. They didn't overeat carbohydrates, which can cause visceral fat easily. So when people eat 400-500 grams of carbs and then train twice a day maybe and do 3 hours of cardio in order to burn fat because they're creating fat, which is absolutely insane. But then look at the guys from 90s until now. Look what's happening with their guts. On top of that, insulin has entered the stage. And that is even making it worse. So in order to be healthy, which means aesthetically pleasing at the same time with a small waist and obviously vacuum pose when you pose on the stage, people are becoming unhealthy. You know the stories of how many people, ended up very badly in recent years. And the main reason, one of the main reasons basically, is that overeating carbohydrates and uncontrollable amount of insulin and growth hormone and similar agents that literally develop your internal organs, guts, and this is why you get so blocky in your midsection. I find it really despicable that bodybuilding has entered into these waters now. But this is me. I don't know what you think. This video is an attempt to teach you how to be healthy now and also for the rest of your life, how to control carbohydrates and make sure that you eat only enough. You just need to eat necessary minimum of carbohydrates. So that will be for an average person who is inactive, probably in a range of 100 to 250 grams a day max. Everything more than 150 grams of carbohydrates for an inactive person will be very dangerous. And for bodybuilders, depending on your size, obviously, but anywhere from 150 to 250 grams of carbs will be more than enough for anybody, because you don't need more carbs than that. You don't need 300, 400, 500 grams a day, because this is what they're going to do to you. I've just explained. So all these 5 unwanted consequences can be controlled if you control amount of carbohydrates that you eat. One way of controlling it is to keep in shape year round. Unfortunately, most of the people in the gyms, especially serious ones, advanced bodybuilders as well, most of them are constantly fat. They are not just fat, they're swollen in the midsection. They're developing visceral fat. And this is what they're calling off-season. But they remain in that off-season for the rest of their lives. Most of them compete 2-3 times, get in shape, and they go back into that off-season bulking mode, which means I'm going to develop some visceral fat, I'm going to overeat carbohydrates, I'm going to be insulin resistant, I'm going to be provoking heart problems and maybe diabetes type 2, because this is how we do it in the off-season when we are bulking. So guys, good luck to you. I hope you have learned from this video what you should avoid and what you should do. And I believe that you will get serious about your health and about your future. Now, for the ones who are interested in further expanding their knowledge and widening horizons, I have published 10 ebooks that you can find on my website. Also, I offer other services on my website that may also help you, because we can work one-to-one. Even if you're not in London, we can do together lots of things. I can help you develop muscles faster, lose your body fat faster, get in fantastic shape faster than you ever expected. And for that, you should check my website, see the video that I have for you, and you can get in touch as I provide personalized training programs, personalized nutritional programs, telephone consultations, and also online coaching. Of course, for people who live in London, I do personal training one-to-one. But for you guys who are not in London or in UK, Australia, New Zealand, US, anywhere else in the world, we can still do a lot together. So guys, I hope you have enjoyed this video. If you did, please subscribe to my channel if you already didn't. And also like and share the video, send me your comments. And until the next video, I wish you all the best. Thank you.